Greetings Pathfinders and welcome back to the Absalom Archives. Today we're going to have a quick supplemental video, an introduction of sorts. I was going to include this in the first deep dive of the next series, but I felt it kind of interrupted the flow of what was going on there, so instead you get this! It also allows me to kind of isolate the more meta parts of this topic, talking about game additions and mechanics here, so I can keep all the video stuff a little bit more lore focused. So let's get started on all that stuff I just said. What kind of information are we going to learn about the gods? What's the most important information we need immediately, and what can we save for the back half when most of you have tapped out to play a video game and are only half listening? No shame, I do that all the time too. We have three basic periods to draw information from: Pathfinder 1st Edition, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and the 2nd Edition Remaster. Each one presents slightly different information about each god, and that information is relevant to different people in different ways. Sometimes these differences are just a shift in terminology or a slight rewording of a concept. For example, both 1st and 2nd Edition have domains. These are broad concepts a deity is meant to have some control over and a mechanical option for players to use. For classes like clerics, paladins, champions, war priests, and inquisitors, their god matters and those domains can influence how that character acts and plays. When a god's domain changed from 1st Edition to 2nd Edition, that doesn't specifically represent a change in that god's ideals or philosophies. Rather, it's a mechanical change for how the game worked then to how it works now. As an example, 1st Edition had a law domain, and that didn't get ported over to 2nd Edition. This doesn't mean gods more dedicated to law and order suddenly turn into anarchic chaos monsters, it just means that mechanical aspect of the system no longer fits. Transitioning off of that nicely is the subject of alignment. 1st and 2nd Edition use the two-axis alignment system you're probably familiar with from D&D, with law and chaos as one line and good and evil as another, with neutrality in the middle. The 2nd Edition Remaster removed that part of the system in favor of the more granular edicts and anathema system it uses. It's pretty easy to see where most of the gods would have fallen on the old system since they were initially designed to fit with it, but that may not always be the case. So why include this information at all if it's, for lack of a better term, outdated? Well, partly it's because I want these videos to be applicable to all versions of the game. Edition changes are a metatextual thing, the in-universe lore doesn't change. And there are people who still enjoy playing Pathfinder 1st Edition even as the setting moves forward, so if they want that information, they should be able to have it. Now if you watched the Core 20 primer, you might remember that I used the term historical alignment when talking about that part of the gods, and that's the same thing I'm going to use going forward. Anytime something is part of a system that is no longer used, I'm going to give it the historical prefix. If that thing got adapted forward into the new edition, it goes with the basic information. As an example, Earth and Protection are both domains that exist in 1st and 2nd Edition, so a deity with those will only have them listed in their Domains section, along with any of their other current ones, while previous domains like Law would go under the Historical section. 1E also had a subdomain system which hasn't been expanded into 2nd Edition yet, so all those will also be labeled historical. The rest of the information is all lore-based and so shouldn't need any kind of disclaimer. However, keep in mind that I'm presenting this information from a historical perspective. Any changes or developments the deities go through as part of the ongoing story I won't be talking about until I cover that part of the story. But that doesn't mean I'm only sticking to older sources for these videos. After all, they need to be relevant to 2nd Edition players too, so my primary sources for these are going to be Inner Sea Gods from 1st Edition and Gods and Magic from 2nd Edition. At the time of this video's making, the book Divine Mysteries isn't out yet, but you can bet your booty I'll get it as soon as it is so that I can add that to the list of sources. This should be fine for the Core 20 gods, but anything further out I'll need to start roping in additional sources. Given that it's a much more varied group that I would be pulling from, I'd need more varied sources, so that'll actually be in the videos, just so you'll be able to check my work and keep me honest. Anyway, after we get all the quick fun facts out of the way, we'll go over the deity's history and mythology, general practices of their worshippers, prominent holidays, all the fun stuff. That's a quick summary, but of course there will be longer segments because that's where all the juicy details live. I'm also considering some shorts to accompany the various gods that I'm calling champions of insert god name here, going over some of the more powerful servants of the deity, their heralds for one, as well as a few more powerful champions a party might encounter. And since I love giving examples, let's use a completely made-up god as one. Ahem. Ogrecles, the boss unending, god of big strongness and strong bigness. Historical alignment, chaotic evil. Edicts, be big, be strong, obey the boss Ogrecles. Anathema, be weak, be small, disobey or challenge the boss Ogrecles. Domains, abomination, indulgence, might, tyranny. Historical domains, chaos, destruction, evil, madness, strength. Historical subdomains, fear, ferocity, fist, insanity, rage, riot. Ogrecles is the biggest boss of all big bosses. He was once a weak little baby until he stopped being small and got really big. He got so big and so strong that he was stronger than all the bosses, so he decided to become the biggest and the bossest of all the big strongs. He used his powerful legs to jump really high, so high he punched the sun and became a god. That's why we worship Ogrecles, because he's way up in the sky doing big boss things there, like smacking moons around for fun. Worshippers of Ogrecles show their devotion to their boss and his rules by lining up in order of biggest to smallest and punching each other. If a smaller person doesn't flinch or fall under the bigger person's punch, they're allowed one punch back. Otherwise, they keep going down the line until the smallest person is punched, usually to unconsciousness. Larger gatherings almost never complete this ritual, as most of the time it devolves into arguments about height long before the actual punching can begin. If a brawl breaks out, it's customary for everyone to join in and all participants to fight until unconscious. If the last person standing isn't the biggest and strongest, the brawl is considered cursed. Ogrecles has one sacred holiday, the summer solstice. It is believed that on that day, when the sun was highest, was when Ogrecles jumped into the sky to punch it. As no one is stronger than Ogrecles, the worshippers instead mimic his jump by hanging a target, usually a cow or pig, but other humanoids are fair game and sometimes used as warm-ups. If there are no viable options, the smallest worshipper is used instead. Each worshipper takes a turn from smallest to largest, attempting to jump and punch the hanging target. The goal is to kill it, though it's considered bad luck if someone other than the biggest and strongest actually does that. The exception is if there are multiple targets, in which case the biggest worshipper must kill the biggest target. After all the hanging targets are dead, a feast is held using their remains. And that's the kind of quality content you can look forward to, though with much better written and more canonical subject matter. I'll see you in the first deep dive soon, where we'll be covering Gorham, our Lord in Iron. Until next time, Pathfinders, explore, report, and cooperate.